Okay, Chair, we're streaming live on YouTube, so I'll hand over to you to start the meeting.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual LED Monitoring Forum meeting on the 17th of January 2023. I am the Chair, Councillor Sam Hawkins, and I'd like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. May I remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. In the event of a break in the internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. I will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of forum members here present.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bickley.
She sent her apologies. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dent.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor De Salmon.
Present. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward. Councillor Hookway.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon. Councillor Miller.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Rowland, please.
Present. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. And I can confirm that we're correct, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to take a small liberty here at this point. A couple of bits of housekeeping. I think, Peter, you wanted to take an opportunity just to introduce Alan to the forum, please.
Yes, I'll let Alan introduce himself very briefly, but as you remember from the last meeting, Jamie Bryant left us and Alan is his replacement, who's our Director of Leisure, which is a slightly different title because his focus is very much on the leisure side and on delivering the leisure strategy. But I'll let Alan give you a very brief resume. Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name's Alan Waistel. I've been in leisure for 30 plus years. I've worked for two of the biggest operators, which was Parkwood Leisure and DC Leisure back in the day, now known as Right Directions. Background is work for 4 councils. Education, was a lecturer for 4 years, lectured in elitism back in the day before I went travelling for 2 years. Have worked pre this role as a director for Thrive Services CIC. We looked after the leisure facilities in Gillingham and Shaftesbury and the surrounding areas. Due to issues with utility bills, there was decisions made on a change of direction in relation to the board and what we were doing going forward. My background is PPM. I have a lot of PPM background, project management. I've spent the last 19 months worrying about electricity bills and how we're going to make the leisure facilities survive, along with trying to employ and keep employed people through COVID period. As they say, as a stick of rock, cut me in half and it'll say leisure throughout. Any questions?
Thank you, Alan, for that introduction. And I believe our Vice Chair, Councillor Miller, also wants to say a few words.
Thank you. This will be my last council meeting after nearly 4 years. I've attended and contributed to over 100 meetings, and this will be my last. Serving on this forum has been one of the highlights of my term, as some of the issues we have had to grapple with have been extremely challenging. But the quality of debates and cross-party cooperation has been the best I've seen in my time on this council. Everybody knows that state-funded leisure provision across the country is in deep crisis. External pressures, the pandemic and the Ukrainian war have made this sector extremely hard for councils to fund and operators to deliver. We know this, and it's been disappointing that the government haven't spotted the crisis and understood the need to support the sector. But I believe with determination, partnership and trust, the life-saving and enhancing facilities we have across the district can survive and prosper for the benefit of the physical and mental health of the residents who live within the district. I want to thank Councillor Paul Arnott, the leader of the council, for nominating me to vice chair this forum, the portfolio holder Councillor Hookway for his support also. It has been a hugely beneficial experience to me, and I've learned such a lot. I want to also thank the chair of the forum, who's given me direction and from whom I've learned a great deal. Councillor Jack Rowland, who has always been so forensic on the finances with LED. Councillor Young, who has always been so knowledgeable. Councillor Steve Gazzard, not officially a member of this forum, but has played such a valuable role to it, and is what I would describe as an Exmouth legend. And I even extend my thanks to the opposition, Councillors de Sarum and Den. They are true gentlemen, and they have always approached debates in this meeting non-politically and with dignity and wanting to do the right thing. And a huge thank you to the officers, Simon Davey, Charlie Plowden, Tim Child, John Golding, James Souter, and George Pineda Langford for their experienced advice and all the work they have done in the background, which is not always seen. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I want to pay a huge credit to all of the staff at LED, past and present, who have delivered such an important service for our residents. And long may it continue. So thank you, and I wish you all goodbye at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sure everyone will agree. Thank you for your kind words, and you'll be missed as a member of the forum, and I'm sure the council. And now back to the agenda. Agenda item 1 is public speaking. We've had a question from a member of the public, which I believe Democratic Services will be reading out, please.
Yes, Debbie is going to read this.
Yep, sorry, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie.
Just struggling to unmute myself. So, members, we have a question from Andrew Tyerman, and the question goes as follows. How are EDDC and LED working together to ensure that older people are not forced out and excluded from participating in physical activity and put under further financial pressures arising from the current economic crisis and the recently increased cost of membership? The EDDC Public Health Strategic Plan, 2019 to 23, highlights the shocking 15.5-year life expectancy difference for Exmouth residents between the least well-off and their more affluent neighbours. The first remedy in the strategy to tackle this inequality is physical activity, which is well established as a route to better health into old age. Yet the 5-year East Devon Action Plan makes only one reference to daytime programmes for older people, and not until 2024-25. The least well-off, or those in receipt of certain benefits, are eligible for a 25% membership discount. However, the cost of membership remains significant. Those not eligible for benefits, including many older people drawing a state pension, are expected to pay the same as any working age adult. The cost of living increases, including the same energy price rises that precipitated the membership increase, also affect this group of people more than most, and many will face hard choices about retaining or starting a membership, resulting in worse health outcomes for themselves and the area. The Council should urgently work with LED to seek creative and flexible models of affordable membership options that encourage older users to take regular physical exercise. I note that some activities, such as bowling at the ocean, already have a concessionary price for the over 65s and off-peak reductions. So why not swim, gym and classes memberships? Have you considered a discount off-peak membership rate for the over 65s who are more available during the day when the facilities have fewer users? My concern is that unless we take urgent and decisive action, leisure facilities will become out of reach to many residents, resulting in a further widening of the life expectancy gap. And that's from Andy Tyman. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. I think it's fair to say the council's priority has been to use its finite resources to focus on those identified through that piece around the low income, where it will make a real positive difference. Unfortunately, as I say, there are finite resources. Peter, I don't know if you want to add a sort of supplementary comment from an LED perspective to that.
Well, just to reinforce that, Chair, is that we target, and this was reinforced in the leisure strategy, we target people on low income and the least well off, as Mr. Tyman refers to. So any pensioner who's got pension credit, for example, gets the 25% discount, as does anybody with means tested benefits or universal credit and activities like that. And I have, by the way, met Mr. Tyman and explained this, but whilst I sympathise with the view, obviously, I think you're quite right, Chair, that we're targeting the right people, which is the least well off, rather than just indiscriminately people over 65, a lot of whom in East Devon are reasonably well off. I think nothing more. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. On to agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of October 2022. If there are any members with any comment on the minutes, please raise your electronic hand. As I see there are no hands raised, I will assume they are agreed. Thank you, everybody. Agenda item 3, apologies. Sarah, could you confirm apologies, please?
Yes, just from Councillor Bickley.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declaration of interest. When your name is called and mindful of the new code of conduct, please state your declarations, including which agenda your declaration relates to, state what exactly the interest is, and the specific type of interest you are declaring. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
No interest, and apologies, Chair, but Councillor Haywood has asked me to offer apologies through him. Sorry about that, through me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dent.
Non-registrable interest. I'm a member of LED, Community Leisure, and I use the service regularly.
Thank you. Councillor Desamen.
Having looked at the agenda, I don't see anything that I need to declare. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Nothing to declare, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
None, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Well, I just want to thank Councillor Dent for actually reminding me of the actual type of interest that I was meant to declare, because I was going to be very confused. A non-registrable interest as member of LED, along the lines of Councillor Dent. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Rowland, please.
None, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. There is one item which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way, listed at agenda item 11. Agenda item 7, LED facilities and activity update. And the report will be introduced by Alan, Director of Leisure or LED.
Actually, I'll pick it up if I may,
Okay,
Chair.
yes.
Rather than put poor Alan on the spot, who's only been here a week.
That'd be a nice introduction for the first.
Yes. I could go through it, but I'm hoping people will have read it. And if I could perhaps even link it going through to the KPIs, I think we're working really hard. There's an awful lot of activities going on, which are summarised in the report. We saw until November a considerable, continued sort of growth in activities and membership. And then December is always a difficult month when attendances decline, and they declined fairly rapidly, partly due, I think, to a period of very cold weather. And also it may be, but we don't know, and we won't know until the next 2 or 3 months, so this month and next month, start to become clear whether the cost of living crisis is starting to hit, and people having, with Christmas and getting their utility bills and mortgage interest payments going up, are perhaps looking at their disposable income and the what they can afford to do, with leisure spend and memberships being a key issue. But well, I'm sure we'll come back to that. So probably, I think, Chair, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Yes, we have a couple. Councillor Rowland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Peter, for the lead-in. I just wondered, from a budgeted headcount point of view, just how many actual people you've got on board and how many vacancies there are at the moment, or people serving notice. And are there any critical areas where operating a service is in danger of not being carried out due to staff shortages?
I don't have the figures in front of me, although I did see them this afternoon, funnily enough. We've got a fairly stable workforce at the moment, but we have had problems recruiting and continue to have problems recruiting at operational level, particularly lifeguards, because there is competition for those roles within the district, within the holiday camps in particular at Sandy Bay and the other one up the road, which whose name I've forgotten. So I think that's where our pressures have been at operational level with lifeguards, receptionists and exercise coaches. We are working hard to retain them, and as I've mentioned in my later report, we're having to address that quite seriously in this year.
Thank you. Councillor de Saran, please.
Oh, yes. Hi, thank you, Chair, very much. I think it's really congratulate you, Peter, on this renewable power supplies certificates that you have received. Did you have to meet any targets, or could you just briefly explain what this certificate means, if you can please? Thank you.
Well, very simply, and I might refer to Karen in a minute, our FD, it quite simply means that we are now only purchasing from renewable power companies. Karen, I don't know whether you wish to comment on this.
I don't. Yeah, it basically relates to where we get our suppliers from, and that's managed through a consultant third-party provider for us. So yeah, we're seeking to source through green energy as much as possible.
And I would add as well that we still use a energy consultant who is watching the market on a daily basis. So we are tracking gas and electricity prices, and when appropriate, on daily rates, locking in for either a few weeks or months at a time. We have just locked in some gas prices because they've dropped, and so we are monitoring the market as well as making sure that we use just the renewable sources.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like other councillors, I'm really interested in this renewable power certificate. I know it's probably early days at the moment, Peter, but are you, or has there been an indication that you're going to be able to reduce your bills by a considerable amount?
Something I've been, apologies to Tim, I have been banging on about this for some time and mentioned it in the last few meetings. Alan, now that he's started, is looking at some further improvements to the pool plant that might be able to reduce our electricity and chlorine reliance. But the big saving, Councillor, would come if we could install air source heat pumps and have no reliance upon gas whatsoever to heat our pools. And it is gas which is the one which has increased the most. And what Alan neglected to mention in his little intro, despite me reminding him to do so, is that he's actually installed air source heat pumps in his previous job and is somewhat of a much more of an expert in air source heat pumps and PV, photovoltaic panels than I am. And I think once he's got his feet under the table, we'll be very keen to work with Tim and his team to help lead that, because I do believe we can get these air source heat pumps installed if we act promptly. All around us, local authorities have already got air source heat pumps installed for their swimming pools in Teignbridge, in Wiltshire, in Mid Devon, and we just need to catch up with this, because that's where I think we could find some significant savings.
Thanks, everybody. That's that item, I believe, dealt with. So moving on to agenda item 8, LED Community Engagement Report. Peter, back to you.
Again, Chair, I think I'll just take any questions, but just to, again, praise our community engagement team who are doing fantastic work out there in the community. Some of that is targeted at the older generation, going back to the early public speaker. We, as you can see from this report, we work from parent and toddlers through to Age UK, and people so it is cradle to grave that we work through. Charlie knows and might mention that we're going to be able to target more of the outreach groups and some of the target groups, because Charlie and John have been, John Golding in particular, has been successful in achieving some funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and that is going to be targeted at outreach, community engagement work, and the target groups that we are already trying to reach, and give us a little bit of extra funding to reach those most harder to reach groups. So that's good news as well. So I'll probably just take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. We've got a line for you. So Councillor Rowland, please.
Well, first off the blocks again. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Peter, again for the lead-in. I'm not sure if this is a question you can answer or not, Peter, but I'm just interested to know whether there's any engagement with the Restore group that cover the Axe Valley and Seaton area specifically, because I know the work that they do does involve a lot of work with the community nurses as well, where they identify people where they're actually trying to keep people having to go into the acute hospitals. So it does seem to be a lot of synergy between the work that they're trying to achieve, this part of the work that they're trying to achieve, and what could be done through LED as well.
I don't know the answer whether we're specifically working with them. I haven't seen them in the report, but we are working with a lot of health groups, force and cancer groups and stroke rehabilitation groups, as well as the ageing groups. And what I will do is I'll certainly pass that on to Lottie and Andrew Dare, my community engagement managers, and see whether they're a group we can make contact with and perhaps draw into our network. If there's a chance you could ping me an email with any contact details, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, will do, Peter. Thanks for that.
you.
I did read the report carefully, which is why I mentioned, I couldn't see them mentioned, which is why I'm talking about it now. So thank you. I'll send on their contact details. Thank you.
Councillor Saran, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to comment on the continued support for the Exmouth Stroke Survivor Club, which I know is also close to Councillor Hookway's heart as well. I think it's a very positive club, and I know that you've given them some equipment. Do you feel that's enough equipment, or do you think they should have some more, or how do you feel the equipment is being used? Is there a sort of any way of getting positive feedback on that that very positive thing that you're doing? Thank you very much.
I will ask Lottie to give me a bit more information for the next meeting. What I was planning is, in the summer after the new council has been elected, is I think it would be very useful for Lottie or Andrew Dare or both to come to a monitoring forum in the early days of the new council to go through exactly what they do and to answer some of the questions which I'm struggling to answer in terms of detail. Because they are so active and there are so many activities going on that I think it would be worthwhile them coming to make a presentation. I know Lottie's done that in the past, but I think her last one was pre-COVID, and I think Andrew Dare has done one since as well. But and then some of these questions can be answered. I know that we are working with the stroke group quite a lot, but a bit like Councillor Hawkins said at the start, we're working with limited resources as well. So we're trying to spread our resources and our support across as many groups as we can, and as I mentioned, there might be a little bit of extra funding to come now from the UK Prosperity Fund, which is one of the things we could look at for that group.
Excellent, thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question; it's just to say I'm really pleased to hear the feedback from Withicombe Primary School, and it shows that your work is what you do with the schools is really working, because obviously you're helping children with their anxiety levels, and we all know that children are really struggling still at this moment in time, the same as adults are. But just to say thank you on behalf of the school.
Thank you. I can just give you a little bit of it's quite surprising really just how two or three of the areas within the district, and I think this is one of them, I've got a little focus of disadvantaged groups, and working with some of these schools has been quite eye-opening. And I know we talked to this group, and can you believe this? There were one or two children who'd never been to the beach, you know, and they live in Withycombe. You know, that's unbelievable to me. And this is the sort of thing which I think we're trying to break down.
Thank you, Peter. So moving on then to agenda item 9, LED KPI dashboard, November and December. Peter.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you've got two in front of you. The November one is supported by the facilities update. The December one was hot off the press without an opportunity to write any script to go with it. But as I mentioned earlier, again, I'll take questions, but you can see from the November one that we were on a gradual improvement. We were not yet anywhere near our pre-COVID levels. We're up to about 80–85% by the end of November. But then what happens in December is a traditional decline with Christmas and potentially some bad weather. This one looks like it did drop more than it would normally do in December, our attendances, and whether that was just the weather, whether there's the cost of living crisis starting to kick in, as I mentioned earlier. It is the month when people start to get there. I know I got my utility bill, that was a shock, and I can afford it, and a lot of people probably can't. It does tip some people over that affordability tipping point and into a point where they might think it's no longer financially viable for them to continue as a member and perhaps revert to just once a week pay-as-you-go visits. So as I mentioned earlier, I think the telling period will be this quarter we're in now, when we see what the perhaps medium-term effect of the cost of living crisis has on memberships, as people's utility bills and mortgage costs go up, as well as the cost of fuel and food and so on. So that's it in summary, really. Doing okay until the end of November, continually improving, but then seeing a big drop off in December, and this month will be an interesting indicator as to what we might expect for the rest of this calendar year.
Thank you, Peter. The December sort of drop off on all the KPIs, was that, obviously it was anticipated, but has it been to the degree that it was anticipated, or is it more severe?
It's more severe than in previous years, and I think one of the things we're working on, and as we move into the rest of this year, and certainly what we're looking to do, Chair, from April onwards, is to start comparing year on year. It's been meaningless to do a year-on-year comparison for the last 3 years, because from April 2020, when we went into lockdown, we haven't lost the data, but the data is just totally irrelevant. It's we were shut for so many months, but as we go into 23-24 from April, we think we do have meaningful data for this current year. That's April 22 to March 23. So what we want to do is to try to, without congesting the KPI report as so it's still readable, is to start to show year-on-year comparison when the data becomes meaningful from April. So that'll help, I think, but I can't give you that today. Just anecdotally, this is a bigger drop-off than we've seen pre-COVID for December.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rowland.
Actually, I think Peter just sort of covered the question I was going to ask, because I didn't know whether he had comparable figures for December 2019, which would be the only truly comparable month pre-COVID, wouldn't it? It's quite worrying to think that was already December 2019. Can't believe that. Pre-COVID. Is that data available, Peter?
Yes, it is. I could dig it out, but as I say, it is pre-COVID, and as I mentioned, we're probably at about 80–85% of where we were pre-COVID at the end of November. And but if you'd like, I'll try and dig that out and either include it in the next report or send it out. Perhaps send it to Sarah to circulate.
Okay, Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I can see no other hands. So on that basis, then I'll move on to agenda item 10, the Exmouth Pavilion report. Tim, I think you're going to open this one, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the first of two reports this evening on the pavilion. My report, being the first, looks at it from an assets and placemaking perspective, and Peter will follow with a report on the pavilion, but from an LED perspective. And I think in terms of the debate, it's important that both reports be considered together. So back firstly to my report. So it sets out a baseline summary of the issues affecting the pavilion, along with possible options that members might like to consider moving forward. Clearly, any future decisions will need to consider fully the wider implications of the cultural strategy, but also other corporate objectives of the council, but also needs to factor in LED. In terms of the property itself, you'll see from the report it's expensive. In terms of capital investment, I cover that off in paragraphs 1.6 and 1.7. You'll see that we've already committed circa £400,000 on urgent works, and that's been approved through the last year or two in terms of our capital programme, but it requires a further circa 600k of investment just to keep the property ticking over, more or less in its current form, i.e. continuing the status quo. In terms of maintenance costs, so maintenance revenue spend, I cover that in paragraph 1.8 and 1.9 of the report, and you'll see we're typically overspending. And by doing so, that's then impacting, as the report sets out, impacting on the available spend at our other leisure sites. For 2020/21, the revenue spend was 36k, gone down slightly in 21 to 22 to 32,000. In paragraph 1.16, I reference the newly adopted cultural strategy and its reference to the pavilion, and I think that's particularly pertinent in terms of looking at options moving forward. And from paragraph 1.17 onwards, I set out a series of high-level options which the forum might like to consider. These range from some less ambitious options to some more ambitious and possibly aspirational options. I'm very conscious of the relevance of the pavilion to the placemaking work that and the consultation that we undertook in the summer, and also the work being commissioned this year in terms of moving that project forward. And for that reason, my colleague Jerry Mills is also in on this meeting, should his input be needed in terms of any questions. But I would please ask that any review of options for the pavilion site, please, is done alongside the wider Exmouth work, ensuring that we can benefit fully from all of the consultation that was done last summer. Because there were lots of references to the pavilion site, so I think it would be a shame to miss that opportunity in the work that's already been done, and to show that we are listening. The timing of this also works quite well for linking it in with the wider Exmouth work, in that we are about to, we're in the process of instructing consultants, so they'll be commissioned within the next 2 months, and we'll be taking forward that work. So the timing is ideal if we wanted to, if the forum wanted the consultants to look at the pavilion sites alongside other sites in Exmouth. So I am happy to take questions, or Chair, you might rather Peter follows on and questions come after. I'll leave that for you, Chair.
No, thank you, Tim. No, I think that's the sensible option. Obviously, we've got effectively 2 reports to this item, including as well as a 30-year-old report, which makes it a nice Interesting one. So, Peter, yeah, do you want to introduce sort of your part, and maybe if you want to respond to any of the points made by Tim, feel free.
Yeah, if I perhaps just summarise my report, I do appreciate the issue and the dilemma really of having an aged facility like this, and all I can do is comment in terms of our operation and management of it. As I think I've alluded to back in I think, although I see this report from back in 1991, I think it's a very different facility now in terms of its usage. It's extremely well used. It's a very popular venue. Our manager, Jeanette Cass, has done a fantastic job of turning this facility around into one which is very popular now and offering a very diverse range of activities, from showing ballet and opera, and it's the base for the two musical societies in Exmouth as well that have got nowhere else to perform. So it is now a very well used facility. It up to the pandemic in 2019, it actually made an operating surplus and was devastated by the pandemic because not only we had all the shows to be cancelled, but unlike the leisure centres, which were allowed to open with social distancing didn't work in the pavilion in the theatre because we couldn't get a viable audience when the audience was spaced out. So it's had a really difficult 2-3 years nearly now, and is beginning to recover. So operationally, this is a facility which is, from our point of view at LED, is a relatively marginal activity financially, if and when it recovers fully to its pre-COVID levels. So the issues aren't really around, is it popular, is it well used? Because yes, it is, and yes, it is. The issues are really relate to the facility investment in terms of getting it shipshape. We've got the committed expenditure which is needed, but I think the issue at the moment is it is leaking like a sieve. We've got water running down the walls of the changing rooms. We've got buckets down, and we're looking at cancelling potentially this weekend show because the changing rooms aren't fit for purpose. So the issues are not, from my point of view and from LED's point of view, about is it viable operationally? Yes, it is. The issue is really about is what can the council afford to invest to get this facility shipshape and usable and by the public. And my personal view, and I know this is shared by the board, is I can't see a replacement or an alternative in the medium term. If you're looking at a multi-million-pound rebuild, that's got to be taken into account with the pressures from the leisure strategy as well, and potentially a new leisure centre in Cranbrook. So, it's a difficult issue. I do appreciate. All I can say from an operating point of view, I think we'd like to see it running as it was in 2019, get back to those levels. We've got 250 odd shows and activities booked over the next 12 months. Which would be very difficult to now cancel and very costly to now cancel. So I think we are pretty committed now and through this time next year. We are stopping taking bookings for January and February next year at the moment on the basis that is when some maintenance works are scheduled, and those maintenance works will require the stage and the theatre side of the business to close for that period. Although we would be able to keep the cafe going, but the cafe obviously relies for a lot of its income from shows as well. So in a nutshell, operationally, if we get back to pre-COVID levels, I think we've got a thriving theatre. Whatever you determine to be the long-term future, which is not something I'm commenting on at all. I'm just wishing to comment on the fact that short-term to medium-term, this is and could be a thriving facility that I believe requires support, but how much you can afford to support it is, I understand fully, is a problem for the council. So I'll hand it back to you, Chair, and I can see some hands up for either me or Tim. Hopefully they're all for Tim.
Yeah, we've got the people. I just wanted a point of clarity. When you say in 2019 it was an operating surplus, is that meaning it's just gross profit as opposed to net profit?
It means that the operating costs which we're responsible for were covered and more than covered by the income received. So it did make a small operating a relatively small operating surplus.
But before the allocation of head office and fixed costs?
Partly, yeah, but those costs would then go to other facilities if it was shut, if that's what you're sort of talking about. So our head office costs are distributed amongst our facilities mainly on turnover. So the head office function would still continue, and the head office overhead would be reallocated across other sites.
Yeah, no, I got that point. I was just trying to understand if the very bottom line of in 2019 was a profit or a loss position, because obviously operating surplus doesn't necessarily include every line and can give a different consideration to the point.
It took into account every cost in running it and every income received, but okay. Not that.
That's a gross profit.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Peter and to Tim for these reports. I think Tim's report is extremely interesting and gives us some very wide-ranging options as to what to do. But what to do is a very difficult thing to decide. From a point of view of culture, which is why I have an interest, from the point of view of our Exmouth Board Councillor, I am really concerned that the pavilion maintains its cultural offering. I'm trying to avoid being predetermined here. I'm not going to say which any of the options I choose for the future, but whatever happens, whatever this forum decides, whatever it recommends, we must have a continuing operating centre for culture, such as the pavilion in Exmouth. One of the things that was said to me during the consultation during the summer was, why doesn't Exmouth have its own cultural centre like Teignmouth? And I said, well, you know, we're working on it. And this is something that we do need to do. The financial side is very challenging. I'm not going to enter into that debate at all. That's not my area. But we do need to understand just how important the pavilion is to the cultural life and the general well-being of Exmouth residents. This report, these reports would generate a lot of interest across the town. I expect there will be a lot of comment, and therefore we need to think very carefully and plan very carefully as to exactly what we're going to do for the future. I also finally want to say I absolutely agree with Tim's suggestion that the placemaking exercise with the appointment of consultants should be involved in this exercise to see if they can provide us with a way out to fund the building for its maintenance, and also for the future that we all look forward to. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really glad that Councillor Hookway spoke before me, because I think that, well, I certainly agree with everything he said, particularly on the point that Exmouth needs a theatre. We're a town of 40,000 people, and absolutely we need a theatre. But the question is the current theatre in the right place? And we look at the 1991 report, and I'm not sure it is in the right place. And I think that option 9, and I can speak, without predetermination, I'm not on the cabinet, I can say that I feel excited by option 9, the idea that we go for trying to relocate the pavilion into a different area where there's more parking, where there's an ability to attract more footfall. And I personally think the pavilion's probably in the wrong place. I mean, currently that is a prime site as well. I think we've got to have a really serious conversation. I'm going to make a recommendation, which I think hopefully will be along the lines of what Councillor Hookway and officers, and it is from the guidance of officers, which is not to dismiss any option at this stage. I don't think we can do that. I think we need independent advice on this. I think we need to assess all the options, and B, that the placemaking consultant for Exmouth, who is to be appointed, be asked to consider within wider work the options put forward in this report for the pavilion, initially determined alignment against the theme's characteristics in terms of reference agreed by Cabinet. And I think I've taken advice on those on that recommendation. I think that's a sensible one. And I think, you know, we cannot get to the stage where we have no theatre in Exmouth. We've got to have some serious conversations about what happens in the meantime. If we have this long-term 10-year plan of option 9, where we can, this consolidation model, which I personally find very exciting, on the gateway of Exmouth, you know, what happens in the meantime? Do we knock the building down? Personally, I think that'd be a really bad decision. On the other hand, I find some of the proposals within the report difficult. For example, £400,000 to replace the roof. You know, as a councillor and even as a resident, the idea that the council would pump lots and lots of money into replacing a building that then gets knocked down in 5 to 10 years, it to me feels like a gross misuse of taxpayers' money. I mean, it just is. Why would you do any more than patchwork on a building that you don't? And clearly, I think cross-party, there isn't the confidence that we believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, any councillors can correct me if I'm wrong, the idea that that site is the right site for a theatre. I don't think it is. You've got no parking round, you know, we've got very little parking round there. You see the 1991 report, and I think we've got to think very seriously about the amount of money that the council is investing in the pavilion, because if we start investing far too much and start replacing roofs and the facilities, and then in 5-10 years time we knock it down, you know, councillors and the council itself will be subject to significant criticism, which nobody wants. I mean, it's taxpayers' money. So I think this is a really difficult issue, and I think it needs an independent external consultants report, and that is what I've recommended. And thank you very much, Chair. Cheers.
Thank you. Just the admin around the proposal there. Do we have a seconder, please?
Chair, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. And Sarah, did you get the wording okay for your minutes?
I've just had the wording sent over to me. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, we'll do it at the end.
Okay.
I think if we've got a proposal in a second, then we can visit at the end. I just wanted to check. You got that. So, Councillor Rowland, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was very interested, although it's 32 years old to the month, to read that Ernst & Young report, because there are many things in there which still apply today. Anything that was written 32 years ago, it's amazing what's has or hasn't happened in the intervening 32 years. But we have there a prime site. For what it offers, I totally agree, it's the wrong location. And for a town the size of Exmouth, the 40,000 population, it does need a proper facility which can actually provide a bigger capacity than what's provided at the pavilion. So I totally endorse that. Being chair of the capital allocations panel as well, I know full well the requests that have come forward. And although we've agreed some expenditure on that building, the whole reason that we didn't agree about the costs to do with the roofing are exactly because of the debate we're having this evening. So I did indicate that I would happily second Councillor Miller's proposal, because that's where I was coming from, but Councillor Arnott's done that. But you now know from what I've just said that I actually support that way forward. And I think it's absolutely essential that this subject is covered as well in the Exmouth placemaking work, because it's such an important facility in its own right. But as I said, wrong location, and Exmouth definitely needs a facility that can provide what is already provided at the pavilion, but also much more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next will be Councillor Arnott, who I think is having video issues, so will probably be sound only.
Yes, can you manage that, Chair?
Yes, that's fine. It's more acceptable than your flashing green screen we were getting earlier.
That's very, very kind of you. First of all, I'd like to thank Tim and Peter for their reports and the accompanying oral reports as well. And I completely get where both reports are coming from. I wouldn't want to do anything other than praise the way in which the pavilion is being operated at the moment and has been operated. The fight that the management and LED have put up to try and get it back from COVID, and that's been well noted within the council. So thank you to everybody, all members of staff there. And I would hope that what we can aim to do if we take this into the placemaking arena is something which perhaps allows the Exmouth Pavilion to continue for a few years, whilst a potential other option, as in option 9, comes forward and starts to be delivered. Exmouth, as the cultural report that we commissioned has shown, has got enormous arts, entertainment, culture potential. There's a demand there as well. And it's not just from the town of Exmouth, it's from outside. If you put on the right exhibition, event, ballet, dance, theatre, whatever it is, people will come from the much wider district and indeed from outside county to do it. My only thought, is irrelevant at this stage really, is that if there were to be a new venue, it probably needs to be bigger than 400 seats to be viable. I think you need to be something nearer 600 or 700, but that's a matter for later discussion. I think Tim and Jerry have done an absolutely outstanding job in this report, and I'm not one to sort of butter up officers' reports the whole time. It would get very tiring, wouldn't it, if the leader kept saying that every time. This is a really seriously well considered piece of work, and I'd like to personally thank them both for that. I think it's fantastic that Tim has got Jerry on his team, and it's fantastic we're looking for future consultation as well. So the question becomes, doesn't it? How do we make sure somehow that the pavilion can carry on for another few years, whilst getting on at pace with trying to look for a potential building a very exciting prospect for Exmouth elsewhere? And I think that'll be the work of that we need to do this year. So, with my apologies to Councillor Rowland, I didn't know he was going to second Councillor Miller's recommendation, which I hadn't heard until it came out of Councillor Miller's mouth. So very grateful to him as well. Probably enough said, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can't vote on this one, but I would like to put on record my thanks to everybody at the pavilion for the amazing job they've done since COVID. I'm a regular person that goes down there, so if you like, I have got an interest in what happens at the pavilion. As Peter has said, wonderful management down there. Staff are very kind and considerate, and I honestly believe that we have to have the pavilion in Exmouth. There's no doubt in my whatsoever. Wouldn't it be totally ironic if we demolish the pavilion, we can't find anywhere to go? And that's another question in my mind is, where are we going to find the space, buy the land, etc., to put in a brand new theatre? Exmouth is one of the top tourist attractions in the southwest now, and you go down there regularly and you see people from all over the country that come to the pavilion, and locals as well. And we hear about the number of shows that go on there. It's absolutely astronomical. The number of different shows and varied across the whole range of ages that go on at the pavilion. And I'm not sure whether or not the pavilion needs to move, because you go to other seaside resorts, and where is the theatre? It's near the seafront. So I would have to be convinced that the pavilion needs to be moved to somewhere else, because I think that's where a theatre should be, along the seafront. But I honestly think that the work needs to be done for this season, anyway. And I've seen all the scaffolding up down there, Peter, and I think that work needs to be done urgently. And it's really sad that shows are going to have to be cancelled because of the water damage because of all the different shows that are coming. We think of Centre Stage and things like that want to use the pavilion. I just think whatever the council decide to do, it's going to be a long term. So in the short term, all right, we've heard about the problem with the roof. We've got to do something about the roof, otherwise the building will have to close. You can't have the roof leaking water when shows are going on and when you've got people in there watching the show. So we've got to make a decision that in the medium term, we're going to have to do something about the roof. The long term, well, we can take a bit longer to think about that. But my personal opinion is I need to be really convinced that we need to move the pavilion from the seafront. Thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Saran, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think as Councillor Miller said earlier in this debate, we can't get to where we are and have no theatre in Exmouth. And I think the leader said that we should put ourselves in a position where this current situation we've got continues for a few years, because I think we certainly can't knock down the theatre or do anything to the pavilion, and then Exmouth will not have an entertainment venue available. So I'm aware of the extra work that has to go into it financially, as I think this very good report by Tim has put forward. And I think that we need to support it. And we need to, as the Mayor pointed out just now, if the roof needs to be looked at, we must look at it, because otherwise the alternative is to demolish and have done with it. But then if we do that, we don't know where we're going forward. And I note that the LED said that option 1 in Tim Child's report would therefore be their preference in the medium to short term. So my personal take, having heard the arguments in this debate, is to make sure that whatever we come to a decision, Exmouth will definitely have a theatre, because otherwise the public won't accept this, and it won't be good at all for Exmouth as a thriving tourist town. So thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you. Tim, the roof repairs, sort of the urgent ones, presumably they come under a revenue maintenance line?
Yes, so you'll see from the report that there was a bid put forward in this next year's round for just under 400,000. That was, as you'd expect for that amount of money, that was a significant roof replacement. We have acknowledged that that bid not being approved will increase our revenue spend. So we've acknowledged that. We're aware already, and I mentioned it when presenting my report, that we've already overspent on our maintenance budget in recent years on the pavilion site. So that, in all likelihood, will lead to added revenue pressure. If the steer from, depending on the steer from this committee and then recommendation onto cabinet, it might be prudent for officers to go away and look at a middle road, not spending 400k, but likewise not going around with a bucket every time it rains and looking at, but that's something that I think we need a steer from yourselves and cabinet as to what the plans are for the building. But yeah, we can certainly, I would suggest that going around with buckets, as Peter said has happened, and I've heard from colleagues has happened, for the next 5 years potentially, I don't think is viable. So yeah, we'd need to look at an interim solution. Chair, to sort of, I suppose, specifically answer your question, yes, it would be revenue in terms of very small fixes, but I suspect we'd need to come forward with a smaller capital bid, smaller than a 400k, to allow a fix that would see us through the next 5 years.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Hookway, please.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Tim just to clarify, when we were at the BSCAP meeting in December, did we not suggest that this forum would decide the future of the roof rather than put it to one side? Because I know there are implications. Clearly, there are implications on the council budget, and I seem to remember that this forum would decide what we would do with the issues about the roof, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I understand it's not only the apex roof, but it's also the flat roof that's failed as well. And this is, of course, some of the problems that have happened from previous administrations where maintenance has not been figured in. Now, I was not aware that the roof was leaking to this extent. I think that's really very serious. I'm sure it must be a health and safety matter at some point, never mind having performers and patrons getting wet and staff having to run around with buckets. I mean, it's just an absurd situation. So I don't believe as portfolio holder I'm allowed to put forward a recommendation, but I do think we have to do something here, and something that needs to be done fairly quickly, because the situation does appear to be untenable. So can we have a serious thought, please, and perhaps a proposal from somebody else as to how we're going to get this roof fixed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway, you're a member of the forum, so I don't see why you can't make a proposal, but I'm happy for someone to correct me on this.
Okay, as am I. Okay. All right. Well, I'll let other people have a chat first before we I go any further.
At the moment, we've only got Councillor Miller, I think, obviously responding, and then just going to sum up his already laying proposal. But I can see Councillor Rowland's put a hand up, so I'll defer to that quickly.
Thank you. It's just about the point about what happened at the BSCAP meeting about the subjects of the roofing works. I've just looked back at my notes, and what we actually agreed was to actually defer it pending further information from LED. So I think the recommendation could, depending on what happens today about that recommendation, would actually be deferring it back so that we could actually make a decision about the capital expenditure, which was 25,000 in the first year, but subsequent years was just over £365,000.
Okay. Councillor Arnott, please. Councillor Arnott, I don't know if you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, my mouse had frozen. I'm interested, I'm guessing Councillor Miller maybe as well, in any additional recommendations that Councillor Hookway may have. Just as a sort of thought here is that, of course, LED and we together own and operate the ocean. There is the top floor of the ocean, which has a stage which could be altered. I don't know what the capacity is there. It could be as many as 300. It might be 400 in certain circumstances. I'm just kind of, blue sky thinking, as they used to say in the 80s about this. If there is tiered seating, for example, that is mobile or portable, which it probably is, from the pavilion, there would be a way of increasing that top floor capacity for similar entertainments. So I'm just putting that there as is nothing we can decide now, but I just wanted to seriously address Councillor Gazzard's point, which is absolutely right. That, you know, there can't be a year, a month really, where if the pavilion can't continue to operate in a few years' time, that we don't cover that period of time. And I do think the Ocean has that potential. I'm just throwing that in there, Chair. Thank you. But I do take Councillor Hookway's point that that the recommendation as it currently stands from Councillor Miller, seconded by me, doesn't really address and slightly, you know, well, it doesn't deliberately evade, but it doesn't actually cover what we do now about the roof, does it?
Thank you. I'm going to completely throw the order of names upside down now. Peter, because your hand came in then, I'm assuming you're responding quickly to the question raised by Councillor Arnott, so I'll let you dive in next.
Yeah, just very quickly, the Ocean top floor has got a very low ceiling and a very small stage, so it's suitable for small entertainment. So, you know, for a singer or a comedian for a wedding, but we can't get any tiered seating in there because of the height of the ceiling. And a point I made on the chat is that the capacity of the pavilion has been increased to 550 since LED purchased the tiered seating. So we get 550 people for the big shows. The seating capacity at the Ocean on the top floor is 200, but as I say, that's a flat floor really for weddings and parties and wakes and things like that. It isn't able to host, for example, the centre stage shows or the MCO shows, or even a band and seat more than 200 people. So we'll put what events we could on there, but it certainly isn't fit to replace the shows which the large shows that the pavilion hosts.
Thank you, Peter, for that detail. Apologies, Richard, you've been waiting patiently, so feel free to speak.
Thank you. And you know, there are sometimes I sit here and listen to the forum, and I wish I were as a councillor. This is one of the evenings where I'm very pleased I don't have to be a councillor, because I don't envy you having to make the decisions that you're always going to have to make this evening. I think for me, there are two distinct time frames for us as LED. I think I believe that even if you made a decision by the end of this calendar year as to what you want to do, it's going to be another 4 to 5 years before you actually opened a theatre. So I'm looking at a time frame in the medium term of 6 or 7 years into the future. If you want to keep a facility in Exmouth, and if that is the pavilion, and I hope sincerely it is, I therefore think an investment of between £400,000 and £500,000 spread over that period of time would not be a negligible investment, and you would not be held to be negligent in making it. So I would seriously hope that we could persuade you to make that investment for the medium term. But my concern is also with regard to the long term. We as LED have got interest in two of your strategies, haven't we? We've got the arts and culture strategy, but we've also got the leisure strategy. And we know that the leisure strategy has got major capital requirements in it in exactly the same time frame that you're talking about now in respect to the arts and culture strategy and a particular theatre. And Peter referred to the issue of Cranbrook and the desperate need for leisure facilities in the Cranbrook area. And now with with the potentially additional new town facilities very near to Cranbrook, it would service that area as well. So I understand that you'll need to put everything into the melting pot, but please think about 7 years, perhaps even longer, before a new culture facility is actually up, built and operating, and make that short-term investment into the pavilion to make sure that we can carry on providing an excellent service to the residents of Exmouth.
Thank you, Richard. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of a possible recommendation for the roofing works, I suppose there are two possible scenarios here, or three scenarios, I suppose. The one recommendation could be no. Another recommendation could be yes for up to the amount that was bid for a couple of months ago, which was 390,500, and a figure of the recommendation go along the lines of a figure up to that, on the basis that clearly as officers, but we would look at based on where possibly a recommendation is going to be going to this evening in terms of looking at other options, in terms of, look, do we need to do a repair to last another 20 years, or are we looking at something to last another 5 to 10 years? So that's one option. So a recommendation of up to 390,500. Alternatively, there could be a recommendation for officers to go away and to come up with an alternative proposal that is aimed only at the short to medium term, sort of 5-7 years. Interesting enough, Richard's comments just now about timescales, yeah, absolutely agree. Those sorts of timescales you were looking at, you were talking about. So yeah, the second proposal could be that, yeah, officers go away and we present back to a subsequent LED forum meeting with a detailed proposal and cost. So I think there are those sort of different ways of approaching it.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to go back to Councillor Miller. I very appreciate I've left you hanging for a while. I was thinking it would be a summing up opportunity, but I'm not sure.
Well, it won't
now.
be now.
No.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I think I will want to weave in Tim Child's suggested recommendation there. I think it's probably quite urgent, so I'm not sure whether it needs to go to the next LED forum. It might be best going to the next cabinet. You know, when we're talking about the roof leaking, I think this work needs to be urgent. To sum up, to put my recommendations forward, including the one that Tim's put forward, but I would be asking officers, if they can, to get that work done for a cabinet meeting rather than the late April LED forum. You know, that's taken it's a long time. So if they can do it beforehand, that would be good. So referring to the land owned by East Devon District Council mentioned by Steve, Councillor Gazzard, you know, from my perspective, Exmouth has a huge amount of land owned by East Devon District Council. We have the Imperial Rec, we have the lorry park by the estuary. These are, you know, fantastic sites potentially to have a theatre and for the option 9 that Tim has put forward. So I am, you know, personally, I am assured that there is the land within that the East Devon District Council owns within Exmouth that can provide the kind of building and also have the parking facilities that the pavilion currently doesn't have. And we only have to look back to the 1991 report to see that has been that's hamstrung the ability of the pavilion to reach its potential. I think in the short term, as Councillor Arnott mentioned, there is Ocean, and it needs to be investigated in some way. And within the recommendation, I think I've moved, that can be assessed by the consultant. I think it does need to be assessed. The idea of a short-term option where a smaller theatre goes into a different venue run by LED whilst we look at the long-term future. And with reference to the chair of the board, Richard, purchase the roof, look, from my perspective, and you know, councillors may disagree with me, the idea of paying £400,000 to replace a roof potentially in the long term for a building that might be knocked down in a few years is, I do not think is going to be accepted by the local public. We don't want buckets. We need patchwork, certainly, but the idea of taxpayers' money going into some kind of replacement is going to cost that amount of money, I think is personally unacceptable. And finally, I just want to recommend, as Councillor Hookway and Cabinet, I think I said this at the start, but I think I'll say it again, just to emphasise it, they need to discuss the best route forward when it comes to the roof repairs. And it's basically going on from the previous point. You know, there needs to be a value for money assessment, and I think I can absolutely understand why the budget setting and capital allocations working party panel decided not to agree to put that money forward, given the widespread questions over the long-term future of the building. So I'd like to move my recommendation, and I hope it will be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for my benefit, can you let me know what the revised recommendation wording is, please?
Yes, I'll certainly try now.
In the meanwhile, Councillor Hookway, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to disagree with Councillor Miller on what he's just said, because I do agree with comments that have been made about the time frame that we're going to look at. I think that if we have a recommendation from consultants to build a completely new facility in some parts of Exmouth, that could take a minimum of 8 years. That would be two councils worth of time before we could get anywhere built. These things take time. I read a news report today from Torquay. It's taken them 10 years to decide the future of the Torquay Pavilion on the harbour side there. So these things take time, sadly, they do. And I think that the issue of the roof is much more important. Clearly, it is in a very bad way. We are picking up here one of the problems that has bedeviled leisure provision, not only in East Devon, but across the country. The LGA pointed this out recently as well in their publications, that maintenance on leisure facilities has not been consistent and effective over time. So we have a situation where the roof on the pavilion is in an extremely poor condition. As someone who has lived in Exmouth for a fair part of his life, I know what weather can be like in Exmouth. If it can be raining, it can also be windy. We need to do something about that roof fairly quickly, in my view, because if we're not only going to get rain damage, we could also get wind damage. And we certainly don't want slates flying around the seafront in the evenings or at a particular time, because the nails holding the slates down have gone, which I believe was one of the issues that was reported. So I would like to make a recommendation that this forum recommends to Cabinet that repairs to the roof of Exmouth Pavilion take place as a matter of urgency. Thank you, Chair.
Happy to second that, Councillor Hookway.
Thank you both. Just looking for a bit of guidance there. Obviously, we've got Councillor Miller's recommendations as well, which I don't think run against that. So are we able to take forward two sets of recommendation from two different people? I kind of feel like I don't see why not. I just don't think I've seen it happen before. Judging by the sea of silence, no one's telling me it's wrong thing to do. I think we're a forum that's reporting to Cabinet in any event, so we can of get a bit loose and fast with our rules, hence why we're online anyway. So let's do that, unless anyone particularly objects with that view. Councillor Dasarim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I totally endorse what Councillor Hookway has said about the roof, and I think we need to look at a 5 to 7 year time frame, and we must also ensure value for money. And I've had a look at the report on page 26, which summarises the costs, and I'd be grateful if the officers would also provide, I know we've got this issue of the roof, but a recommendation of any other problems that could go wrong with the pavilion, the structures of the pavilion, in the next 12 months, because otherwise we don't want to come back to another meeting and find that something other disaster has befelled the building because we didn't check it. So I'd like to see some kind of survey done to see what other jobs need to be doing this particular year and at what cost. So then we can get a better picture if it's just the roof or it's going to be other areas as well. So I don't know whether members feel the same way, but that's just something I thought we should consider.
I'm happy to weave it into my recommendations, Chair.
Can Tim comment first? Because I kind of always assumed there was kind of a rolling survey, and maybe that exists to a certain degree, but I'd like some clarity, please, Tim.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So we have a stock condition survey, which will include a rolling programme over the next sort of 5 to 10 years in particular. So yes, that's in place. I suppose what's important here is if this forum were to recommend to Cabinet that we look at other options, and possibly those options included within the report, that based on that, we perhaps shouldn't be spending the £400,000, but spending a lesser amount. I could see in chat just now, and sorry, Councillor Miller, I hadn't had time to come back to you, but I think some suggestion regarding the wording of this additional recommendation. I was picking up on Councillor Miller's suggestion, but also Councillor de Serum's. I think it could be along the lines of that a further report be brought direct to Cabinet, outlining those works that are needed to the pavilion in the next 5 to 7 years.
At the earliest opportunity, I think, as well.
Yeah.
An urgent report.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're honing in to where we want to be. Sarah, are you happy with what you've got written down? Let's start at the beginning.
I've captured the various recommendations, I think, that people have made. I'm just a little bit unclear as to what we're going with.
If you can read out Councillor Miller's recommendations, I'd like Councillor Arnott to confirm if he's remaining as seconder to begin with, and then I think we've secondly got Councillor Hookway's proposal, and I don't see those two conflicting, so I think they can be all taken as ones rather than we need one or the other. And as none of the senior officers here have said, "What on earth are you doing?" I'm taking that as a green light to do it.
Okay, so what I have from Councillor Miller is A, not to dismiss any option at this stage, and B, that the placemaking consultant for Exmouth to be appointed be asked to consider within wider work the options put forward in this report for the pavilion, initially determining alignment against the themes, characteristics and terms of reference agreed by Cabinet. So that's what I've got from Councillor Miller. And then from Councillor Hookway, to recommend to Cabinet that repairs to the roof of Exmouth Pavilion take place as a matter of urgency.
Thank you. So, Councillor Miller, are you happy that captures yours?
Yeah, definitely that captures my recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, you're still happy to second that?
I am, Chair. I do like the idea, if possible, of rolling in some of what Tim said as well, unless Councillor Miller feels that it's already implicit.
No, I think Tim. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Arnott. If we can also weave in Tim's recommendation on the roof with an urgent report to a next Cabinet, I think that would be perfect. And I think that also hopefully helps with Councillor Hookway's suggested.
And with that, Chair, I would be very grateful, obviously as Chair of Cabinet, it might be more appropriate for somebody else to then second that final suite of recommendations, so to speak, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah, no, that sounds sensible. So effectively a Part C by proxy of Tim. Tim, can you dive in there, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I think a revised recommendation, the third recommendation, which ties in sort of 3 and 4, if that makes sense. So Councillor Hookway's and Councillor Miller's could be along the lines of an urgent report be brought to Cabinet outlining works needed to the pavilion over the next 5 to 7 years, noting the forum's request that support is given to undertaking urgent repair works to the roof.
I'm happy with that, Tim. Councillor Hookway.
Sorry, Chair, I misheard you. Yes, I'm happy. I think that's an excellent, excellent compromise. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, and apologies, I've missed who seconded Councillor Hookway, but
I did, Chair, and I'm in absolute ecstasy with it. I think it's excellent wording, and I must congratulate Tim.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody, for getting us to this point. Councillor Rowland, please, with a maybe not a third proposer.
No, don't worry. I'm not going to muddy the waters. Well, I might do it a little bit, I suppose, is what I'm about to say. I just wanted to throw a question to Simon, actually, because having gone through the approval of the budget for the next financial year through scrutiny and overview last week, and we're destined to agree the final budget at the 22nd of February full council meeting. I just wonder what the implications are of what we're talking about tonight will have on the overall budget for next year. Simon, is that a curveball I've thrown at you, or is that?
No, I think process-wise, I think members are fine in terms of unless Tim's going to bring his report through for the 1st of February cabinet, which I shouldn't imagine so in terms of the work required, then I think the budget will go through and the recommendation from cabinet onto council. Then it'll have to be an in-year capital decision, which does happen. You know, members, such circumstances do come up. So we have to progress as a supplementary estimate in year.
Right. Thanks everyone.
Jeff. Thanks, Simon.
It's a big and important area, so it's important to make sure we got to where we wanted to go and take the details as necessary. But I think we've refined it. Hopefully everybody's happy now on what the proposals are, and I'm going to recommend at the moment we take them on block. So if we could then therefore do voting using.
Can I call for a recorded vote, please, Chair? I'm joking.
I'm pretty sure I've still got the power to keep people out of a meeting, but if we can go for green ticks and red crosses, that would be much appreciated, please. I think that's unanimous.
Yes, 8 green ticks in favour, Chair.
That's great. Thanks, everybody, for that debate. And that brings the private part, or the public part even, of our consultative meeting to an end. However, can I remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then your comments will be live to the public. And I'll also just suggest maybe we just take a quick break and rejoin at 7:35. That gives everyone about